what I am going to talk about, present to you today, is a set of, in fact, initially I was thinking of presenting two recent work, probably due to the time I have for the talk, as I don't want to go too fast. I will mainly concentrate on one of these work, which has been recently accepted to ICML, and which is a framework to differentiate persistent homology. And this is a joint work with several colleagues and students, and also colleagues from INRIA, but also colleagues from the Japanese company Fujitsu. Okay. So just another important point is that feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. So I don't know if there is a way to wave your hand or something like that, but you can also interrupt me. There is no problem, and feel free to interrupt. So what I'm going to talk about today is topological data analysis, or part of topological data analysis. I will go very quickly through an introduction. I don't know how familiar you are with this area, but the idea, or the general idea of topological data analysis is that when you look at modern complex data, you in general observe that this data carries some kind of topological or geometric structure, and the general goal of topological data analysis is to develop some methods to formalize this notion of topological or geometric features of data, and also to provide some tools, mathematical and algorithmic tools, to infer this topological and geometric properties from data. And so that's the first, I would say, the first part of the work when you have to do when you do TDA. And then when you have, you are able to catch topological or geometric flavored features from data, then another part of TDA is to try to find a clever way to use this information in some more standard data analysis and machine learning pipelines. So if you look at the picture on the slide, it's a kind of, there is a central tool in topological data analysis, which is called persistent homology, which is a tool that allows to capture some topological information about the data in some kind of multi-scale way. I'll come back very quickly on what is persistent homology in the next slide. But one important point to notice here is that the way this information captured by persistent homology is encoded as a diagram, which is just a set of points in the real plan. For example, here you have an example of a persistent diagram. And as you can see, this is in some sense, this is a quite complex object for classical data analysis or machine learning algorithms that are used to be fed with vector input and with or with object living in some vector spaces. While here, the information we have, the features we have, are just set of points. So there is a real question and problem to address when you do TDI is that once you have this persistent homology information, how can we use it or convert it in classical machine learning and data analysis framework? So for quite maybe last 10 or 15 years, people have worked a lot on the following approach that consists in trying to find some clever way to convert persistent diagrams, these objects, into a vector object, into vector representations. This has given rise to quite a lot of literature, and many methods have been proposed to linearize or vectorize persistent diagram. And once this is done, then people can use this vectorization as set of features that they can process in a standard machine learning algorithm. And this is not what I'm going to talk about, but more recently, people have started to think about some other way to use this persistent homology information, not to design some topologically oriented features from the data, but to take advantage of this topological information to improve some machine learning pipeline. In particular, what I'm going to talk about is that the notion of topological losses. So I will come back on it, but the idea is that when you have some tools to infer some information about the topological structure of data, you might be interested when you train a machine learning algorithm. In general, the way I'm doing something which is a kind of oversimplification, but in general, when you train a machine learning algorithm, you try to minimize, to optimize a loss function that will, by minimizing this loss function, you will train your architecture to get the model you want to use for your data. And the idea that people have been started to explore during the last few years in TDA is to see how we can, in this loss function, introduce some terms that will depend on the topological structure of the data. And more precisely, they started to think about how can we introduce in this pipeline, these losses, some functions that depend on persistent diagrams. And this will be the main topic of my talk today. And the goal of the talk today will be to show you that, in fact, this can be done pretty easily. And moreover, it's not just a heuristic, but it comes with mathematical guarantees. So we can do it in a well-founded and proven setting framework. Oh, sorry. Is it better with the microphone now? Okay.
Yes, it's much better. It's much better.
So, sorry.
No, don't worry. It's okay.
Okay, thank you for telling me. Okay, so I'm now. So it was just a very quick introduction. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific now. So just to tell you a few things and to fix the idea, a persistent diagram. What is a persistent diagram? I will explain you after that how we get such object. So this is just a finite set in the plan. In fact, in the extended plan. So this is a set of points in R2 where the X coordinate is finite in general, and the Y coordinate is finite or maybe infinite. And this set of points provide a kind of multi-scale topological representation of the data, of your data you are considering. And moreover, when you see this kind of diagram, you can interpret it in some sense because each point in this diagram corresponds to a specific topological feature, in fact, homological features, because when we are talking about topological feature here, we are indeed talking about homology. So it represents an homological feature in some nested family of topological spaces that is built from the data, and the X coordinate represents the way, the time, or the when this feature appear in this family, and the depth coordinate when this feature disappear. So and so this, I'll come back to on how this is built and how this is defined a little bit more precisely later. But the idea here, the important point is that this is a kind of object we generally obtain when we do persistent homology. A set of points. The number of points is not fixed. It might change even if you change a little bit your data. And this set of points encode some topological information. And now the question we want to address is the following. For example, very general question is that, can we in fact minimize functions that are defined on the space or on this space of diagram? So if you have a function that depends on diagrams, we ask the question about is it possible to find some procedure to minimize such function? So if you want an example of function here, when you take a diagram, you could consider the function which is just the function that give you the sum of the distances of the points of the diagram to the diagonal, which is a quantity which is known as the total persistence. So this is a function of persistence diagram. To each persistence diagram, you can associate total persistence, which is a real valued function. And if you have a family of diagrams, depending on some parameter, you may ask the question, is it possible to minimize the total persistence among this family? So in general, it's and this is a question we are going to consider. And I'm also mention another question, which is closely related to this first question, which is, can we understand the average or expected behavior of random persistent diagrams? So the question seems to be quite different, but in fact, the way we address it is closely related to the first one. So I probably won't have much time to talk about the second question. So I will mainly focus on the first one. And the common point between these two questions is the fact that when you want to address this kind of question, you need to understand the meaning of differentiability of persistence or of persistent diagram. So the idea here is that if you have a function of persistence that depends on persistent diagram, the classical way when you want to minimize a function is you compute its gradient and you try to do some gradient descent. And if you are in a smooth case, this is perfectly well defined. And if your input live on some nice object like a Euclidean space or a manifold, it's also well defined. But here, with persistent diagrams that are just a set of points, understanding the differentiable structure of persistence is something which is a priori is not completely obvious. Okay, so just let me show, for example, an example of just to fix ideas. It's a toy example where it might be interesting to be able to minimize functions of persistence. For example, here, this is an example for doing some dimensionality reduction. So the idea of dimensionality reduction algorithms in general is that you have some data in possibly high dimension. So here, what I've plotted on the left is just a point cloud sampled in R⁹. So here, this is just a 3D view of this point cloud, and it has been sampled along two circles. And it's in 9 dimension because in fact, this is a point cloud sampled in the group of rotations in SO3. And when you do dimensionality reduction, you try to project, to map your data into a low dimensional space, in general dimension 2 or dimension 3, in such a way that you preserve some structure about this data. Like, for example, you want points that are close to each other to be mapped close to each other, or this kind of thing. And in general, the way you do, there are many methods to do this, and the way you do it in general is by minimizing some function depending on the data that you want to preserve. And in the middle here, what you can see is that is the result of this dimensionality reduction from 9 to 2. When you use, I don't know which method we use here, but I think it was just a simple autoencoder. And this is a view in the latent space of the data. But the problem you see here is that with the general classical method, is that in general it may preserve some information about the structure, in particular some local information, but at the global level, it does not preserve the topology. So when here you can still see that there are two circles in the 2D plot, but you see it because I have put some different colors on each circle. But if they were of the same color, it would be very difficult to know if this data, in fact, in high dimension, is coming from 2 or 3, from an object that are 2 or 3 cycles or loops, right? Because in 2D, the 2 cycles intersect, and this intersection creates a new cycle in it. So what is appealing to do in this case is would be to, because of persistence, we are able to compute the topology or the homology of this set in high dimensions. And what we can try to do when we do this dimensionality reduction is in the function we try to minimize to add a term, a penalty term that is going to penalize the change in the topology between the high dimensional data set and the low dimensional one. And if you do that, here is a result we obtain using the techniques I'm going to present. You see that you get a 2D projection of your data that is much more close to what happened in the high dimensional spaces. So that is that you have a data set with 2 cycles and not 3, like here. So this is just a toy example to give you an idea, a concrete idea, or an example of why we may be interested in introducing some loss depending on topological information on persistence in the minimization problem. So this is not a new problem. It has been addressed by several people in the recent years. There have been, so here I just mentioned a few work that have been done quite recently that exploits this idea of trying to include some topological penalty or topological term in the loss, in some loss functions that are optimized. This has been done in different settings with a different kind of constraints. But when you look a little bit at this literature, what you realize is that in each case, people are doing some ad hoc construction and develop some methods that are in general restricted to very specific type of data or specific type of loss function or a specific type of filtration to use to compute persistence. So in fact, this observation has been the starting point of the work I'm going to present you today. In fact, by looking a little bit at this work, when you think a little bit about it, you realize that there are 2 problems with this kind of there are 2 problems that appear naturally. The first one is that when you look at this paper, it seems that people are always doing more or less the same thing in a different setting, but the favor of the techniques is always the same. And the reason why it seems to work is it seems to be more or less always the same. So when you observe this kind of things in general as a mathematician, you start to think, is there something general behind that would allow me to put all these techniques and results in a single general framework under which I will get the same kind of results, and where I could generalize things quite large. And the first thing, and the second thing is that you observe in this paper is that this question of minimizing some function of persistence in this paper is always considered from a heuristic point of view. So what people are doing in general is they try to do some kind of gradient descent to minimize their functions. But the way they do the gradient descent, because they do it on the space of persistent diagram, they in general do not have proof of convergence of their algorithm, of their minimizing algorithm. So that was 2 questions that perturbed me for a while. And this is why we decided to try to address this question of having a general framework to differentiate and optimize functions of persistent diagrams, and in which we can prove convergence of gradient descent algorithm. So let me now come to the way persistent. I don't know if everybody is familiar with persistence, but if I remember correctly, Francesco, you told me that not everybody know persistence, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to persistent homology, or to the main idea in 2 slides, and to the necessary things you need to know to understand what will come after. So the idea of persistent homology, I will show it to you in a specific case. So suppose that you are given a point cloud, and in some sense you want to understand the topology, the topology underlying this point cloud. So a very natural idea is to start to look at this point cloud at different scales. And looking at this point cloud at different scales could mean, for example, here, to replace each point in your point cloud by a ball, and looking at the topology, in fact, here at the homology of the union of balls you have centered on your data. When you do that, if you increase the radii of the ball, you build a family of spaces that are the union of balls that is growing, and then you can monitor the evolution of the topology or the homology of this union of ball. So if I do it on this example here, you see that at the beginning, you just have when the radius of the ball is 0, you just have a point cloud. So its topology is just a finite set of points. There is nothing to say except that it has as many connected components as you have points in your point cloud. But when you start to grow balls, at some point, some balls start to intersect each other. And then this means that some connected components disappear and are no longer present. So when you do persistent homology, in fact, what you are doing is that you are tracking the evolution of these connected components as you grow the union of ball, or as you grow the spaces you are building. And here in this example, so after a while, some balls are intersecting each other. So some connected components have disappeared. If I continue to grow these balls, I continue to create some new connections that will decrease the number of connected components. So when I am at this radius, I now have only one connected component in my union of ball. But what I can see is that here I have created another topological feature, which is a one-dimensional topological feature, which is a cycle. Or if you prefer, there is a hole now in my union of disk here. And this feature is encoded in a homology of dimension 1. And by doing persistent homology, I'm doing the same with this one-dimensional feature as what I do with connected component. I'm tracking the evolution of this feature. So at some point here, for some radius, some loop, some cycle, or some hole has appeared in my union of balls. And if I continue to grow my balls, I can see here that soon I will create a second cycle. And by growing a little bit more, this cycle that appeared here will be filled, because all the balls will intersect each other and the hole is no longer here. So this will be the end of this one cycle. So here I have a small blue interval, which corresponds, the beginning of the interval corresponds to the radius at which this one cycle here appeared, and the end of this interval corresponds to the radius at which this cycle was filled and was no longer existing, as a cycle turning around all in my space, which is the union of balls. But now at this radius, this cycle has been filled, but this initial cycle that I've seen a moment ago is still here because the hole here is still here. But if I increase a little bit more, this cycle will also die, disappear. And at the very end, when the radii of the ball are very large, the only topological information I have about this object, this union of ball, is that this is just a space which is simply connected, in fact, and that have one connected component and no other topology in a higher dimension or homology in higher dimension. So what persistence is doing is exactly when you do persistence, you build a nested family of spaces and you track the evolution of the topology of these spaces across the scales, where the scale is some parameters you put on the nested family. So, so that's the general idea. And another thing is that in practice, when you do algorithm, you don't work directly with union of ball or things like that are continuous objects, but you work with combinatorial objects that are simplicial complexes. So, for example, here, what we have done, instead of looking at the topology of the balls themselves, we have looked at what is called the Vietoris-Rips filtration, where the space I am constructing and monitoring is not the union of ball, but is a simplicial complex, where the time of when a simplex appears in this nested family is exactly equal to the diameter of the set of its vertices. So, for example, this edge here appears at times which is equal to the distance between these 2 points. The triangle which is here in this simplicial complex here appear at times that correspond to the smallest distance, to the largest distance between any 2 pair of points of vertices of the triangle, etc. So maybe just so in practice, what we are working on when we do persistent homology are nested family of such simplicial complexes. And just to give you or recall you the definition of a simplicial complex and to give you a few definitions, mathematically, what is a simplicial complex? So this is just, you start with a finite set, with a set V, which will be called the set of vertices. And a simplicial complex K is just a collection of finite subsets of V that satisfies the 2 following properties. The first one is that all the points in V are in this family K. They are called the vertices of K. And whenever you have a subset sigma in K, any subset of sigma is itself in K. So this family of finite subset is stable by taking subsets. And that's it. That's a combinatorial version of, and this subset, the elements of K, are called the simplices. And and you say that the simplex is of dimension 0 when it is a vertex, when it has only one vertex. When the subset is of the cardinality 2, you call it an edge. This is just the edge between the 2 vertices. When it has cardinality 3, this is a triangle. And this is a 2-dimensional simplex, which is a triangle, etc. And what we call the filtration, this is just an increased sequence of, so when you are given, sorry, a simplicial complex K, a filtration is just an increasing sequence of subcomplex of K with respect to the inclusion. So you just ask this sequence to have its union equal to K. And this family in general is indexed by R or by a subset of R. And in some sense, the element of R are the scale parameters of this filtration. So once you have such a family, you can define persistent homology and build monitor the evolution of the topology of this growing family of subcomplexes. At the end, what you get, as in our example, is a set of intervals. Each interval corresponds to the lifespan of some topological feature in the filtration. So, which means that when you take such an interval, the coordinate at the beginning of the interval correspond to the parameter in the filtration at which the corresponding topological feature appear, and the end of the interval correspond to the value of the parameter at which this topological feature disappear from the family of nested spaces. And when you get this family of interval, you call it a persistence. People call it a persistence barcode, and it can such a set of interval can be equivalently represented as what is called a persistent diagram, where instead of representing interval as interval, you just represent interval as point in the xy in the 2D plane, where the x coordinate is the beginning of the interval, and the y coordinate is the end of the interval. And this object is what is called the persistent diagram associated to the a given filtration of a simple complex K. Okay, and now I continue with this notion of filtration and persistence. If I come back to, in particular, to this notion of filtration, suppose now that K, the simplicial complex, is given. When we have a filtration of K, we can associate, in fact, a real value to each simplex sigma just by looking at the time or the index at which it enters in the filtration. So when you are a simplex sigma, you can just define phi sigma as being the smallest r in the family of the parameter family, or the index family, the smallest r such that the infimum of the R such that sigma belongs to the subcomplex K in this R. So now, as K is fixed, we can just encode this filtration as a vector in R to the cardinality of K, where each coordinate corresponds to the enter value of the given simplex in the filtration. And vice versa, if you have such a vector in R to the cardinality of K, that satisfies that whenever tau is a subset of sigma, then phi tau is perbounded by phi sigma, then this vector represents a well-defined filtration of the simplicial complex K. So a first remark we can make here is that this set of vectors in R to the cardinality of K that define a filtration is obviously a semi-algebraic set in this space R to the K, right? Because it is just defined, in fact, by, in fact, this is even a polytope, because it is just defined by linear inequality. Okay, and as now our problem will be to understand how to differentiate functions of persistence. So one of the things from this observation now, we can think of function of persistence as functions defined on a semi-algebraic subset of R to the K. So we are back in a more familiar setting. And what this is just a definition. If we are given a set A, and a map from A to Rk, in fact, not from A to Rk, but from A to the space of filtrations on K, then this map is called a parameterized family of filtrations. So, for example, A could be the whole family, the whole set field of K. But it can be, in fact, the restriction of this map to any subset of field K. So now we have a notion of parameterized family of filtrations, and for each of these filtrations, we can compute its persistent diagram. So now we know how to compute parameterized family of persistent diagrams just by composing a parameterized family of filtration with a map that associates its persistent diagram to a filtration. So what we need to do now to understand the structure of this map is just to to tell a few words about the way persistence is computed, the algorithm, a few words about the algorithm to compute persistent homology. And the algorithm to compute persistent homology, at least on the paper, is a very simple algorithm that proceed iteratively. So we are given a simple complex K with a filtration on it. So we can order the simplices according to their index values. So we just order all the simplices of K according to their the time they enter into the filtration. And the way the algorithm to compute persistence work, or the only thing you need to know about it, is that this is an iterative process where you add the simplices one by one. You start from the empty set, and you add the simplices by one according to the order you have put on them. And each time you add a simplex, you look at how it change the homology group of the corresponding subsum complex. So suppose that we are at step I in this iteration. So we have already computed Ki-1, which is a union of the first A-1 complex simplices, sorry. And we are about to add the simplex sigma I. And we assume that the dimension of this simplex sigma I is K. And in fact, in that case, we have the algorithm consider two cases. The first one is that when you add sigma A, the one thing that can happen is that by adding sigma I, a K-dimensional simplex, you create a new homology class in Ki that was not in Ki-1. So you create a new cycle that is not homologous to any cycle that was existing in Ki-1 before. So if you look at this example here, if sigma I is of dimension 1 is an edge, if when I add my edge sigma I, if it connects two vertices that are in the same connected component of Ki-1, then by adding sigma I create a new cycle, a new element in the first homology, first one-dimensional homology group of Ki. So, and when this happens, the algorithm will register sigma I as giving rise to the birth of a new homological feature of dimension K, if K is the dimension of sigma I. And the other case that can happen is that when you add sigma I to Ki-1, you, instead of creating a new cycle of dimension K, you kill a cycle of dimension K-1. So here in this example, if I add a new edge that connects two vertices that are not in the same connected component, then the number of connected components when I'm going from Ki-1 to Ki will decrease by 1. And then the persistent algorithm is going to identify this simplex sigma I as a simplex that kill some topological features that was created before. And in fact, I'm not going into detail because it's not necessary for us today. The algorithm is going to identify the simplex that has created the topological feature that has just been killed by sigma I. So at the end of the algorithm, when I do this process, the output of the persistence algorithm, it will be just a pairing between the simplices of K, where in each pair, the first simplex is a simplex that in the filtration created an homological feature, and the second one is the one that killed this homological feature, the filtration. And if you look, and then I convert this into a persistent diagram by just replacing each simplex in the pair here by its index value, the filtration. So there is here a very completely obvious but very important remark to make is that in fact in the persistent algorithm, there are two parts. The first one is purely combinatorial. It is just a part where simplices are paired. And the second one is the one that from the pairs of simplices assign a point in the plane by just looking at their index values. And in particular, when you look at this first part of the algorithm, that pair simplices, it is a combinatorial algorithm that only depends on the order you have put on the simplices. So if you change a little bit the index value of the simplices in such a way that you don't change the order, the global order that you have on the simplices in your filtration, the first part of the algorithm will output exactly the same pairing. The points in the diagram are going to move because you have changed the indices in the filtration, but the pairing will remain constant. So in some sense, the persistent algorithm, its combinatorial part is something which is locally constant. It can only change if you change the order of the simplices. And that's a completely obvious remark, but it's a fundamental one to prove that we can minimize, in some sense, persistence function. So just to summarize a little bit here, we have when we have a simplicial complex K, we can represent a filtration as a vector in R to the K. The persistent algorithm is going to pair simplices. I did not go into details, but there are also some simplices that are unpaired that correspond to the homology of the simplex of the complex K. And then this pairing is converted into a set of points in the plane, in the extended plane, because the unpaired simplices are becoming point with a finite x coordinate but infinite y coordinate. And then if you order all these vectors in R2 using the lexical graphical order in R2, you can represent your persistent diagram now again as a vector in R to the K. And then now you can see the algorithm that computes persistence just as a map that goes from a subspace of R to the K to a subspace of R to the K, which is much nicer to study its differentiability. And even better, when you think about it, the values, the entries in these input vectors and the entries in this output vector, which is the persistent diagram, are the same. So in fact, locally, this map is just a permutation of the entries of the vector phi. If I see persistence computation in this way, the persistence just become a permutation of the index value of the vector representing the simplices. And in some, for example, if all the indices values of my filtration are pairwise distinct, this permutation is going to be locally constant, because if I change a little bit the values here without changing the order, this will give rise here to a vector which is obtained by using the same permutation. So you can think of the persistent map as a locally constant permutation of the coordinate of a large vector whose dimension is equal to the number of simplices of your simplicial complex. From this observation, you get some easy result that tells us that, in fact, this persistence map that to each filtration associate its persistent diagram seen as a vector, as in the previous slide, is a semi-algebraic map. And in fact, it's I'm going to skip the part about minimal structures here because I don't want to run out of time. In particular, as this is a semi-algebraic map, we can find a semi-algebraic partition of the space of filtration, such as the restriction of this map on each strata of this stratification is a Lipschitz map. So all this are just a very easy exercise, obvious exercise. Okay. oops, sorry, I've lost my slide. Where is it? Okay. So, and an immediate consequence on the fact that the persistence map as we represent it is semi-algebraic is that this is more or less what I just said. We can find a stratification. If we have a parameterized family of filtration phi, which is, let's say, semi-algebraic, then we can stratify A in such a way that on each strata of full dimension, the composition of phi with the persistence map is differentiable, is smooth. In fact, is analytic, and in fact, is algebraic. And okay, and this is just an immediate property of semi-algebraicity of the map. So, and if we want to just to see a few examples of, or one example of a parameterized family of filtration, there is the example of the Vietoris-Rips filtration, where phi is a map that goes built on endpoint in RD. If we consider the Vietoris-Rips filtration, so this is a filtration family which is built on RD to the n. That goes into this is a filtration of the full dimensional simplex built on endpoint, and a simplex sigma made of endpoint x1 is just its index value is just, as we have seen before, the diameter of the set of points that are in sigma. So this is an example, a classical example. Another one is one given by sublevel set filtrations. If you have a function which is defined on the vertices of K, it can be seen as a vector where you represent the values at each vertex, and you can associate to this function the sublevel set filtration that is defined by the value of the index value of a simplex sigma is just the maximum of the values at its vertices. So all these are very standard constructions. And now I still have just 5 minutes, so I want to go to the main result. And for that, so now what we have is that we can see a parameterized family of filtration as maps that goes to some space to R to the K, where we represent persistent diagram. And now we want to study functions of these persistent diagrams. So if we see a persistent diagram as a vector in R to the K, the thing we need to just to do, so a function of persistence is going to be a function which is defined on R to the K with real values. And to make it really a function of persistent diagram, it has to be invariant to a permutation of the point in the persistent diagram, which can be just expressed in this way. So a function of persistence is just a function defined on persistent diagram, or equivalently defined on R to the K, but that satisfies some that has some invariance property under some permutation of the points in the diagram. And some interesting properties about function of persistence are that if you have such a function E, if it is locally Lipschitz, when you compose it with the persistence map, it is also locally Lipschitz map. And another important point is that if you have a parameterized family of filtration, phi, which is, you can replace in my slide definable by semi-algebraic, then the composition of phi with a persistence map with E is going to be also semi-algebraic if E is semi-algebraic, and it will have a well-defined subgradient in the Clark sense, which means that the subgradient is just the convex hull of the limit of the usual gradient. At Z is the convex hull of the limit of the usual gradient at Zi when Zi converge to Z. And L is differentiable at Zi. The fact that L is semi-algebraic implies that it is differentiable almost everywhere. So we can, at point where it is not differentiable, we can look at its subgradient. It is well defined, and this is just the convex hull of the limit gradient when you go to the point C. And some example of function of persistence are, for example, total persistence, which is just the sum of the distances of the point of the diagram to the diagonal. There is also what is called the bottleneck distance between persistent diagram, which is a very standard persistence used in TDA. If you have a given persistent diagram D star, sorry, you can look at the function that computes the bottleneck distance from between D and D star as a function of D. And it's easy to see that this map is semi-algebraic. It is also Lipschitz. And this is another example of locally Lipschitz function of persistence. This also holds for the ones who know that for Wasserstein distances between persistent diagram, as long as we take exponent in the Wasserstein distance that are integers. And now the question, I'm back to the initial question. Suppose that we are given a function of persistence, a parameterized family of filtrations that are semi-algebraic. We look at the composition of phi with the persistence with E. This is going to be a semi-algebraic function with a well-defined subgradient, and we want to minimize this function. So the question of minimization here, obviously there is no hope to be able to find easily a global minimum of such a function, because in general, functions of persistence are highly non-convex. So what people are doing in general is that they try to minimize, to find a local minimum, at least, of such a function. And the way you do it, if it was a smooth function, for example, is by doing some gradient descent or stochastic gradient descent. Here, our function is not smooth. So instead of doing gradient descent, we do subgradient descent. So we try to find, minimize or to find a local minimum of L by considering the differential equation now, which is instead of a differential inequality, which is just the derivative of Z to find the trajectories of this differential inclusion or differential equation, if you prefer, which is just that the derivative of Z with respect to T is contained in minus the Clark gradient of L at Z. And the standard way, the discretization of a standard way to do that is to use a stochastic subgradient algorithm. So what you do when you do stochastic subgradient descent, you iterate in such a way. So you start from a point x0, and then you build a sequence of point xk, where xk plus 1 is obtained from xk just by adding. So when you are at xk, you choose yk as being the gradient of the map, your map L at xk, and you go in the opposite direction of the gradient by some ratio, which is called alpha k, which is called the learning rate. And when you do stochastic subgradient descent, you also add some noise. So you do not shoot exactly in the direction of the gradient. You allow you to have a little bit of noise in the way you follow the gradient. And this is a standard stochastic subgradient method. And because we have seen that the persistence map is semi-algebraic, we can apply this algorithm to our functions. But and this is what people have done in some papers recently. But the problem is that when you run this kind of algorithm here, as we are dealing with non-smooth functions, it's not clear that such an algorithm is going to converge, and not even clear that it's going to converge. And if it converges, we need to be sure that it converges to a local minimum. And that's the question. And in fact, there is a way to prove that it converges. And it comes from a recent paper by Davis and al. That was published last year. where they were studying the convergence of gradient descent algorithm for neural network that are also, in fact, the loss function in neural network in general are also non-smooth, but have a structure which is very similar to the one of persistence. And so using their work, it's possible to prove that in the case of persistence-based function, we can make this algorithm convergent. For this, we need to make a few technical but classical assumptions on the learning rate alpha k, which is chosen by the user, and the noise zeta k. And the thing we ask, we need to satisfy three conditions. I'm not going to go into details, but the first one tells you that you need to choose a learning rate that goes to 0, but not too fast. So you want the series of the alpha k to be divergent, but the sum of the alpha k square to be convergent. You want to be sure that almost surely you don't go to infinity. So your trajectory remain bounded almost surely. And the third assumption, which is a bit technical, just tells that you need to choose your noise psi zeta k, which is in some sense independent of the past, and that have some moment of order 2 that are controlled. And if you are, and these assumptions are very classical one in when you study stochastic gradient descent algorithm. And if these conditions are satisfied with your learning rate and your noise zeta k, we obtain this theorem, and I'm going to conclude on it, that tells us that if you have a simplicial complex K, a parameterized family of filtration of K, which is semi-algebraic, a function of persistence, which is also semi-algebraic and locally Lipschitz, which is the case of most of the functions that people use in practice, then under the assumption, the previous assumption, almost surely, when you iterate your gradient descent algorithm, the sequence of points you obtain is going to converge to a critical point of the map you try to minimize. Okay, I think it's probably a good time to stop. So I'm not going to explain. So here is an example where we try to optimize the position of some point with respect to some topological constraint. And the important thing I just want to give you also as a take-home message is that by, in fact, introducing this very simple framework, what we obtain is that this is a general framework to differentiate functions of persistence. As you have seen, differentiating persistence, which is a locally constant permutation, is obvious. So this is very easy to implement. So using libraries like TensorFlow or PyTorch. And so on the practical side, it's easy to implement. And it comes with theoretical guarantees that tells you that if you do your gradient descent in a correct way, then you know that your algorithm is going to converge and not to go to something completely wrong. Okay, as it's now almost 1 hour since I started, I just stop here and I'd be happy to answer your question if you have some.